Okay, so in today's lesson, we'll be learning about pronouns, and pronoun error is a commonly tested topic on the SAT writing section as well. So it's important that you're familiar with what pronouns are and then how College Board tests pronoun error on the writing section of the SAT. So first and foremost, what is a pronoun? A pronoun is a word that takes the place of a noun or a group of nouns, and there are two types of pronouns. There's a subject pronoun and an object pronoun. So what's the difference between a subject pronoun and an object pronoun? Well, a subject pronoun is a pronoun that functions as the subject of the sentence. In other words, it's the pronoun that's doing the action. So singular subject pronouns include I, you, he, she, and it, and plural subject pronouns include we, you, and they. So an example using a subject pronoun would be, he ties his own shoes. Okay, so the pronoun in the sentence is he. And he is a subject pronoun, and a subject pronoun is appropriate in the sentence because he is the one that's performing the action of shoe tying. Okay, and now moving on to object pronouns. What is an object pronoun? An object pronoun is the pronoun that is used as the object of a verb. In other words, it's the pronoun that's receiving the action. So singular object pronouns include me, you, him, her, it, and plural object pronouns include us, you, them. So going back to our shoe tying example, a sentence using a object pronoun would be Bobby ties Phil's shoes for him. So him is the pronoun in the sentence, and we're using an object pronoun here instead of subject pronoun because Phil is the one that's receiving the action of shoe tying from Bobby. Okay, so a way that College Board can test whether or not you know the difference between a subject and object pronoun would be through the use of I versus me. So when do we use I versus me? Well, from the previous slides, you know that I is a subject pronoun and me is an object pronoun. So you use I when you're doing an action, and then we use me when we're receiving an action. So let's take the example, my friend and I went to the mall. Well, in the sentence, you're the one that's physically going to the mall, right? So you have to use a subject pronoun in the sentence, which is why I is correct instead of saying my friend and me went to the mall, because you're not receiving any sort of action. Like you're the one that's doing the action. So we have to use I in this case. Likewise, my friend's mom gave a ride to my friend and me. Okay, so me is the pronoun in the sentence, and it is an object pronoun because you're receiving the action of a ride from your friend's mom, right? You're not the one that's physically giving a ride to anyone. You're the one receiving the ride. So we have to use an object pronoun here. Another side note, I always tell students that English is a very humble language and that it teaches through grammar that we should always put others before ourselves, right? So that's why we say my friend and I instead of saying I and my friend, or we say my friend and me instead of saying me and my friend. So always remember, like in grammar and in writing, we always put ourselves after someone else. Another way that College Board could test whether or not you know the difference between a subject pronoun and an object pronoun would be through use of who versus whom. So when do we use who versus whom? Well, who is a subject pronoun and whom is an object pronoun. So just like we mentioned before, we would use who as a subject pronoun, meaning we would use who when the person is doing some sort of action. And then we would use whom as an object pronoun or when someone is receiving some sort of action. So let's take an example here. James, who or whom I adore, will be the main character in Pixar's new film. So I always like to tell students that when they're not sure whether or not to use who versus whom, to try replacing who with a different subject pronoun, such as he, and then see if that makes sense. And if that doesn't make sense, then let's try replacing whom with a different object pronoun, such as him, and then see if that makes sense. So here, let's try replacing who with he first and see if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, then let's replace whom with him and see if that makes it any better. Okay, so James, he I adore, will be the main character in Pixar's new film. Okay, well, that sounds awkward because he and I are both subject pronouns, right? And they're next to each other without any sort of conjunction in between. So it's not grammatically correct to say I adore he. So we know that it can't be who here. So let's try replacing whom with him and see if it makes sense. James, him I adore, will be the main character in Pixar's new film. Well, we know that grammatically we can say I adore him, right? Because James in the sentence is receiving the action of adoration from me. So we know that a object pronoun is necessary, and therefore the sentence should read, James, whom I adore, will be the main character in Pixar's new film. So the rule with pronouns is very, very, very similar to the rule in subject-verb agreement. So the pronoun must always agree in number and gender to the noun that it is replacing. So let's take an example. Each of the Boy Scouts held his head high during the awards ceremony. So here we know that we're dealing with a singular subject because we have the word each, right? In case that we didn't remember that each signifies that the subject of the sentence is singular, we know that of in the sentence is a preposition, and the noun that follows the preposition of is Boy Scouts, which means of the Boy Scouts is a prepositional phrase, which means we could just take that out and the sentence could read, each held his head high during the award ceremony. And therefore that would help us like recognize or see that the subject of the sentence is singular. So we know that the pronoun has to agree with the noun in terms of number. So we have to use a singular pronoun here. And then we also have to use a like male pronoun, which is why we use his instead of their, because his is singular, and because like all the members of Boy Scouts are guys, we know that we have to use his instead of like her. Okay, so some things to watch out for with pronouns is ambiguous pronouns. So ambiguous pronouns are when you use a pronoun that, like a singular pronoun, when there's like two nouns in the sentence. Like for example, there's like two males who are the subject of the sentence, and then we use the singular pronoun he to refer to it. So like the sentence could be, when Bob accidentally ran into Joe, his glasses fell off. So the pronoun in the sentence is his, but this pronoun is ambiguous because we have two males in the sentence. We have Bob and Joe, and we don't know whether or not it's Bob's glasses that fell off or it's Joe's glasses that fell off. So in order to correct this ambiguous pronoun error, we would have to rewrite the sentence to read, when Bob accidentally ran into Joe, either Bob's glasses fell off or Joe's glasses fell off. We have to like specify whose glasses fell off, because if we just use the pronoun his, it'll be ambiguous. Another thing that we need to watch out for is pronoun inconsistency. So that's when we have like a sentence and it has like multiple pronouns in the same sentence. We need to make sure that we're using the same pronoun to replace the same noun. So in this sentence, it says, one must tie your shoes before one goes out the door. Well, the way the sentence is written now, one is the pronoun that we're using to replace the noun. So we have to consistently use one every time we're replacing the noun with a pronoun. So the sentence should correctly read, one must tie one's shoes before one goes out the door. Or we could rewrite the whole sentence to say, you must tie your shoes before you go out the door. Regardless of which one we choose, we just need to make sure that we don't like randomly shift pronouns in the same sentence when we're replacing or when we're referring to the same noun. Okay, so I hope that this helps and you just remember the rule that the pronoun always has to agree with the noun in number and gender, and then the difference between a subject pronoun and an object pronoun. So a subject pronoun means it's the pronoun that's doing the action, and then object pronoun means it's the pronoun that's receiving the action.